Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Hemant Kanoria, Chairman and Managing Director of Shrey Infrastructure Finance Limited. The reason why we have Hemant with us today is because this government is trying to give a boost to infrastructure as a major driver to bring about growth. And Hemant is in power, is in ports, roads. He has experience of funding infrastructure in several areas, and he has a total of over 80,000 crore of funding in several infrastructure sectors. Welcome to our show, Mr. Hemant Kanoria. Now, tell us what ails the infrastructure sector, because we keep hearing from the Minister for Roads, Nitin Gadkari, or from Piyush Goyal, Power Minister, or from the Minister for Ports, that infrastructure is in demand. It is one area where demand far exceeds supply. Yet, it is beset with a lot of problems in terms of implementation. There are simple solutions which you have spoken about. Now, how do we assess this sector, some of the key infrastructure sectors, and in terms of solutions that are needed? I mean, you can start with any one of the sectors that you're comfortable with, because you fund many of these here.
See, I think that if we start off with infrastructure sector has done quite well in the last 25 years, 23, 24 years since the government opened up the sector from 91, 92 onwards. And gradually it has got opened up. Fortunately for us, when we started our company in 89, we started with the infrastructure sector. So we have seen the growth of this particular sector.
Always on infrastructure.
Always on infrastructure. And we started small with financing of construction and mining equipments to contractors who were doing jobs for the government. And gradually when the infrastructure sector started opening up with roads, power, ports, etc., and PPP model came in. So we also got into financing of these particular sectors. And over a period of last 8-10 years, we have also invested in many of these sectors directly and created operational teams which manage these businesses also. So besides financing, we are now across the board and covering the entire spectrum of infrastructure. So therefore, we have seen that there has been a good growth in the country. We have made some mistakes. Anywhere where there's a rapid growth, there would be some mistakes also. We have made some mistakes.
Are they in the nature of policy or regulation or what? The mistakes?
Both. I think that it has been on the part of policies, some regulations and all have not been, revised as the learning has come in.
And are you satisfied with the PPP model? Because there is consensus now that PPP, as we practiced it, it's a bit broken.
No, I think that PPP model still I would hold very strong. That is a very, very successful model. Okay. There are some mistakes which we have made.
Conceptually it is successful.
Yeah, conceptually it is successful. There are some mistakes that has been made while implementing the projects and conceptualizing. So those mistakes can be rectified and we can move forward. And that should be the way that the country should move. Instead of saying that, PPP is not a good model, we should throw it out of the window. And it's like throwing the baby with the bathwater, as they traditionally say. But many of the places in infrastructure, what has happened is that we have put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, okay.
So that needs to be rethought about, that you have to put the horse before the cart. Otherwise, the cart doesn't move. And there are the problems which are now there is that first of all in PPP, because it is, and especially in infrastructure, it is all involving the public at large. So the first thing, whenever any project is conceptualized, has to be thought about that what is the toll rate which should be charged, which is fair to the public and also to the PPP partner. And when you are creating the infrastructure, similarly for the power, at what price tariff that you should give the...
I actually want to come to this. Now, this has been a major issue in India. At what price are you delivering power? This whole coal issue is about whether the reverse auction process, it's aimed at delivering power at a certain reasonable cost to the consumer. Isn't that right? That is the whole... a purpose behind the reverse auction which the government is doing now. Now, same for roads. The government says that all these services have to be delivered, infrastructure services, at affordable cost to the consumer. Now, where are we on this? Are you hopeful that we'll be able to deliver at costs which will make the sector grow?
No, I think that you see in the road sector, the problems are totally different than the power sector. In the road sector, the problem was that it was over-aggressive bidding by the private sector. So I would not blame the government. There have been some mistakes on their part that, the land was not there and the projects have been awarded, or now they are not allowing the exits to happen.
You're saying the over-enthusiasm of the private sector?
Exactly, to a certain extent. So I would say that 70% of the blame goes there, and 30% because the government has not rectified the mistakes and the learnings which they had while implementing the PPP model in roads. So therefore 30% would be government and 70% would be the private sector. But this can easily be rectified. The private sector one is getting rectified because in the natural course, many of the companies are not able to sustain. So new players can come in. There could be acquisitions. There could be change of hands of the projects.
This is the other aspect that I wanted to ask you about. Mr. Gadkari, the roads minister, has repeatedly been saying publicly that he finds it strange that people want to exit projects. He says he's chasing them to complete projects, but roads operators want to exit the project. So he's struggling with this problem, right? Similar situation is there in power also. Many power companies which have started their project, they want to exit. Why is this happening? Why do people want to exit projects where the returns are, as you say, are good?
No, I think that you see that because the returns would be good if the projects get completed and gets completed on time and within the cost. Otherwise, the returns are not good. And many of the companies who have got into projects, they were over-enthusiastic, and so therefore they have taken many projects which they are not able to implement. So therefore, a natural course of exit should be allowed, and there is nothing wrong in it. Because if someone has made a mistake...
So is there a framework in place for natural exit?
So that is not there. And that
is one of the simple solutions that you're talking about?
Exactly. So therefore, there is a simple solution. Someone wants to exit, a new player wants to come in, he is wanting to take over the project and wants to invest in the project and then take it forward. So therefore, I don't think that there is anything wrong in doing that, because an infrastructure project, if it is half or three-fourths completed, it is a national loss.
What is the problem of exit, say, in roads? Just to come to a specific example, can you give me a...
It's the guideline of the government, because the policy and the concession agreement does not allow easy exits. And that is what the minister and the government has been thinking.
Why doesn't the minister change the concession agreement, or the government change the...
The government can make amendments, and the government is thinking about doing it. So I think that, the faster it is done, it is better.
It's been 1 year, so are they still thinking, or are you
I think that they are wanting to do it. They are finding out that how they can do it. And as I said, that the solutions are very simple, but many times the process takes a much longer time.
So and again, so we come back to the procedures, bureaucracy, regulatory bureaucracy, etc., right? And one more thing, Mr. Kanoria. Mr. Gadkari recently said on television that since private sector is not coming up with the adequate funds, especially equity funds, maybe there's dearth of equity funds, government is willing to put money. He used some proportion also, some 30-40% of the funds, and government is willing to partner with private companies, and government is also willing to ensure that private companies get 4 to 5% over and above their cost of capital. What exactly did he mean? He said he was putting in place a framework this last week. What do you make of that?
See, it is still not out, so therefore it is very difficult to say.
You must have also heard of this new...
No, there are a lot of new ideas which are floating around. I don't know that, once we see it being announced by the government, then only we can comment on that. But today, whatever is existing, I do not think that there is anything wrong in the present system. There are certain mistakes where there has been learnings, and I think that from those learnings, we should move forward, correcting whatever mistakes have happened. So road sector, I see it is not that complicated. It is quite simple.
Relatively easier to handle. Power sector?
Power sector has got quite complicated, because in the road sector, the biggest advantage was the toll rates were fixed by the government, and then they work backwards. That seeing that this is something which is fair for the consumer, whether it is a commercial vehicle or a scooter or whatever it is there. So they fixed up a toll, and accordingly they went. So therefore the horse was before the cart, and therefore it moved. And therefore we have seen so many roads.
Sequencing was right in roads, reasonably right.
Unfortunately, in power it has not happened. In the power sector, it has been put into various silos. So coal is a silo, gas is a silo, Then power distribution is a silo. So therefore everything has got so complicated, generation, transmission, everything has been put into various silos.
They need to connect now.
So it has to be connected, because ultimately the first thing which has to be determined, like in the road sector, that for the power sector, what should be the tariff to the agriculturists? What should be the tariff for the residential consumers, commercial consumers, industrial consumers? Okay. You lay down a framework and then let the states.
That's what the regulator is supposed to do, right?
Yeah, but you see, at the central level also there has to be a vision and there has to be a plan of action.
So what you're suggesting is, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're suggesting is at the central level, central government level, they must have an idea of a certain band within which they'll supply power to the consumer, and on that basis they look at costs. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So then you work back.
Sounds so simple, right?
Yeah, it is actually very simple. You know, we are running a distribution company, and so therefore we have done that, and we have been able to reduce our cost systematically just by doing that backward integration. So similarly, if we as a very small player in the country can do that, so similarly at the country's level, it is not difficult to do that.
Yeah.
The point is that you have to think very simply and then work backwards.
Work backwards, yeah.
And
tell me, there are a lot of analysts who say, Mr. Kanoria, that if you do this, what you just said, if you do this simple calculation and move forward on the power sector, and we have so much coal in this country, we have such abundant coal reserves, we can actually deliver coal-based power at around 3 rupees?
Absolutely right. 100%.
Even less than 3 rupees per unit?
3 rupees is reasonable where everyone in the system makes decent profit.
Yeah. And currently, the regulator tells me, I interviewed the regulator, central regulator some months ago, he said power is sold at 5 rupees 50 paisa, 6. So that means we've got it all wrong. At such high cost of power, people don't buy. And then the state electricity boards, they go into huge losses. So that's how all this problem kind of has mounted over the years, right? We will discuss more on this, but after a small break. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are discussing problems with the infrastructure sector with Mr. Hemant Kanoria, Managing Director of Shrey Infrastructure and Finance Limited. So, Hemant, you were saying, you're telling us something about the power sector. You said it is possible in India today to give coal-based power at roughly 3 rupees per unit, whereas actually we are delivering power in poor states where mostly poor reside, like UP, 60% poverty ratio, 55%, Bihar, 55% poverty ratio. Power being sold at 5.5 rupees per unit. That's why nobody's buying power. Now, how do you resolve this?
No, I think the solution is very simple. I don't know that how it will be addressed. It may be sounding very simple. Maybe the government is also considering and thinking about it. They may not be finding it.
Although I must say, Piyush Goyal has specifically made a statement that power generation, distribution has to become more efficient to deliver power at these rates that we are talking about. At rupees. Now, I don't know what they're doing about it, whether they're integrating the various silos that you spoke about. So, how do you see these silos linking up?
See, unfortunately, I think that we have just gone wrong again, because we have 300 billion tons of coal reserve in the country. So therefore, naturally, if a person thinks in a very commonsensical way, you would find that if you have so much of coal, then the power prices, coal-based power, should be lower, because you have resources available. Sure. So how do you increase the production? And how do you get the coal available at the lowest cost? And you set up plants wherever there are coal mines. You don't have to set it up in the south or somewhere, and you can take wheel power through the national grid which is getting created, and the government has done a very good job of doing that very successfully. So you can...
So are you satisfied with the grid infrastructure at the moment? Yeah.
I think that they're working very hard on it, and we will have a national grid all over the country which will be well connected.
And carry on, so you were saying something here.
So therefore I think that in the coal sector what was important was that how do you make the coal available to the power plants at a lower cost. But unfortunately, I think that there are reasons that all of us, we know that because of the auction of the coal mines now, I just don't know what is going to happen, to be very frank. Because the power prices will increase. The generation companies who have bid for the mines, they have been again aggressive bidding because they were in a catch-22 situation. They had set up a power plant. If they don't have a coal mine, then what do they do?
So, therefore, are you suggesting that they might have bid higher than?
Definitely. If you see the bidding process.
So you're saying the reverse auction, which was designed specially for people to bid lower for coal for power, may not have worked as much as the government had thought it.
No, because you see that today what has happened is that, as I mentioned, that there are large number of power plants. If they don't get coal, they will be lying idle. And tens and thousands of crores have been invested in that. So the interest cost itself.
What about the public sector? I thought public sector companies have been given a flat rate of, I think, 100 rupees per.
Yeah, public sector companies are different. I'm talking about more of the private sector.
The private sector generators. Yeah.
Generators who are there. So they would get definitely into a problem because with this kind of coal price, and then if the government has now announced about 2-3 weeks back, I was reading in the media, the government is saying that, we will not allow the pass-through to the consumers of the higher price of power. So therefore, if someone has bid for a coal mine and the mining cost is there, so adding everything together, if the power cost becomes high and if you are not able to pass it through to the utilities, then you have a problem because the power companies will get sick.
So you're saying there is a policy problem there?
Exactly. So the thinking through did not happen, and therefore we have landed up in this problem. And again, it will create complications further. Many people will differ from this, but as a financial institution, if someone approaches us and says that I have taken over a coal mine, and so therefore please finance me, we will not touch it as a financial institution.
Okay, so Mr. Kanoria, what you're suggesting is the government has succeeded in its first objective, that of auctioning these coal mines for power, and getting 2 lakh crores and using that to to give it back to the states where such resources have come from. But the second objective of delivering power to the consumer at a reasonably low rate, at a desired rate, that is still under question. That's what you're suggesting.
And therefore, what will happen is that as a financial institution, if I look at the risk which the generating companies who have taken the mines are going to take, it is very high. So I would shudder to finance any of those particular companies. So it may be holding good for our financial institutions, maybe there are other banks and other financial institutions who may be having a different view altogether. But in our judgment and our risk analysis, this is what is the conclusion that we have come to.
Okay. So how much do you think, in your risk analysis, I'm happy that I'm talking to a financier because you must have done your homework very well. With the kind of auction price that are being discovered for the power sector, auction price of coal, what could be the end price of power at the very minimum at these kind of auction prices?
I think it would,
if you add mining costs and various other costs.
It should not be less than between 4 rupees to 5 rupees per unit. Okay.
If that is the case, then we are back to square one, because the same problem which the central regulator told me 6 months ago, that UP does not, a poor state like UP or Bihar, they do not buy power because their consumers are not willing to consume power at 5 rupees per unit. So that means you are at a price point where consumption will not happen. Is that what you expect?
Yeah, consumption, and you see the utilities basically, their losses will increase if they buy at a high cost.
Yeah, exactly. And subsidize,
And subsidize it. So their cost...
So they're not doing that.
Exactly. So that is why there's a catch-22 situation which has got, unfortunately, which will get created in the power sector. And whereas, sometimes I just see the dichotomy that we have so much of coal in the country.
Yeah.
So we should be one of the countries producing power at the lowest possible cost. And the Prime Minister's vision of making India, a manufacturing base for many of the overseas companies could have actually turned into a reality. Because if you can supply power at a lower cost, our labor cost is relatively lower now compared to China. So we have all the competitive advantages. But if the power cost is high, then that competitive advantage is immediately lost.
and then it has a cascading effect on every other cost.
Yeah,
right?
services, agriculture, everywhere the cost will go up. Inflation will go up also.
Tell me, Mr. Kanoria, I'm very, I'm happy that you've spoken your mind on this, on the cost of power resulting from the higher auction price of coal, that is, auction price that is being discovered now. Can you think of some other very simple solution? For instance, why can't the government just give coal mines to just miners on a management fee basis? Let them mine and you give coal to various power producers at a certain price.
But this is a very commonsensical approach, and which has been suggested to the government very many times, that you see, you own the coal mine, you bring in mining contractors all over the world, you do it on a fair tendering basis, because that is what the Supreme Court has also said, that you have a tender basis.
Just as you do power on a fair tendering basis.
So you do mining, and then after that you allocate the coal to the nearest power plant at a lowest possible cost, so you reduce the transportation cost. You own the coal mine, you are the government owns the coal mine, which is the public, so therefore you own the coal mine, you give the coal, so therefore you don't have to auction the mines. Now by auctioning the mines, what will happen is that many of the companies, to get environment clearances, to get buy land, to do settlement, resettlement, etc., it is a nightmare.
You create 100 other complications. So in a way what you're saying is, just as they are letting a government-owned company get coal at whatever 100 rupees per ton, and they are giving it to whatever NTPC or whoever for generation, you could do the same. You could just mine, have some mining contracts giving to private sector at 100 rupees a ton.
Exactly, because you see that if a person, and especially then you can also segregate, because there are different qualities of coal. You have A, B, C, D category. The lowest category can be used for power. The higher category can go in for steel and other manufacturing units. So therefore, the government is then in a position to also segregate and allocate the coal. Otherwise, people don't know that what is going to come out of the mine. So you may be having a good quality of coal, which you are burning because you have a power plant. So you are putting it into the boiler. So therefore, it doesn't again make sense. So I think that is where, but...
Why do you think such a simple solution is not... has no takers in the government? No, but because when you see a solution to be so simple, you don't trust it. Is that the case?
This is a solution which you have suggested, not me. And you can understand that it is commonsensical, and it is also a very, very easy, practical solution. So this is what should have been followed. But unfortunately, now we have gone on a different track.
There's a similar solution which was suggested on spectrum auction also. Somebody said, instead of going through this complicated spectrum auction process, government is the owner of spectrum. Government should rent out spectrum like you rent out your house, right? So it can be for a minute, it can be 5 minutes, it can be for half an hour. So one journalist I know who wrote this in one of his columns, and his idea was picked up by the former finance minister P. Chidambaram, and he wrote in his column saying this looks such a simple idea, that the government owns spectrum, so it should give it to anybody for a certain rental value. Why get into complicated 30-year arrangements? Then you have to do costing, backwards, forward costing, So,
because see, road and power, these are the two particular sectors where it can create a multiplier effect. So the inflation can go up if the cost is higher. Because transportation is essential. Power is essential utility, because you need it across all the sectors. So therefore, both these two are essential utilities where the cost... I'm not saying that anyone should be making a loss. The government also should not be making a loss. But in this instance, the example that you have given about coal, the government was not going to make a loss. Because the government was only facilitating that the cost of power remains curtailed, because if we did not have coal, if you were importing coal, then it would be a different story altogether.
And probably the other way of looking at the same issue is, the government today claims that it will collect whatever 2 lakh or 3 lakh, or now they're saying 7 lakh crore from coal auctions, and they'll plow it back to the coal bearing states. Now there's a risk of, you don't know how that money will be used by the state governments, right? So it's better to pass this amount directly to the consumer by actually selling by allocating coal at a low cost. That's also a possibility, right?
No, you don't have to allocate at a low cost because the government as it is was not losing anything. Because if the mining contractors,
No, by allocating meaning by being the owner and by by giving the coal
Contract mining.
on contract and then selling it to the private sector.
and you see that basically there is already, so you create an ecosystem where the entire cost is low of operations. And that is very, very important because as a country, if we need to create employment, as a country, if you want to keep inflation down, as a country, if you want more manufacturing companies to come up and agriculture to prosper, services to prosper, so power is an essential requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that context, since India has probably the third or fourth largest, is among the at least 5 largest coal reserves in the world.
Yeah, I think it is the third largest coal reserve in the world.
So it's of utmost importance, necessity.
So as they say, it's water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So it's almost like that.
So let's hope that some of these very simple ideas, which people these days look at with suspicion, are eventually implemented, taken and their benefits are passed on to the consumer. Thank you very much for talking to us, Mr. Hemant Kanoria. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy.